gives me massive amount of pleasure to welcome to join us this afternoon Tanika Gupta. So I've just provided just a little bit of information here. We could spend our whole rest of our time together this afternoon kind of going through all of Tanika's achievements and kind of past works, but she is an award-winning writer of stage plays that have been produced across all major theatres all across the UK, not just stage plays but also radio plays, television dramas, adaptations for the stage. She's also taught drama, run workshops in universities and in a variety of different contexts. And in the kind of context of Lit in Colour Pioneers, we're welcoming her because her play The Empress is part of our EdXL GCSE specification, and therefore it is one of the set texts that you might like to consider or to choose if you were to become a Lit in Colour Pioneer school. So please join me in welcoming Janika Gupta to our launch event.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, I'm not bad, thank you very much.
Oh no, thank you for joining us. So we've obviously been hearing about Lit in Colour and the Lit in Colour Pioneers and the kind of the aims to support schools in diversifying their curriculum. What are some of your reflections then on what you've heard and the importance of offering a diverse curriculum for students?
Well, when I was looking at all those books, I was just thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be great if we'd had those when I was at school? Because, you know, we didn't have any diversity at all. And I was an English literature student at school. And it was actually only when I left school that I found a book by Toni Morrison called Beloved. And I read it and I thought, wow, you know, what an amazing novel. And it actually, in fact, interestingly, that was the novel that made me want to start writing. So because I hadn't seen any Black women role models at all when I was at school. We studied all the great stuff, Chaucer, Shakespeare, Arthur Miller plays, etc. But we never had anything that reflected our community. When I say our community, I mean a diverse community. So, and you know, I went on to write myself. And interestingly, all those books that you have on there, you know, by Mallory Blackman, for example, you know, these are all people who are my contemporaries who I know. Anita and me, Mira Ciel, I adapted for the stage. So it does feel like it's very exciting that, you know, having been, we're mostly second generation immigrants. So it's very exciting to see that we, in turn, our stories and our forefathers' stories and contemporary stories are getting out there. And that actually, you know, what fantastic work you're doing. I mean, apart from the fact that you've taken on my play, but you know, just the breadth of it is just fantastic. And gosh, if only we had that when we were at school, it would have made such a difference, I think.
Yeah, and it's quite a student-led drive, I think, at the moment as well, in terms of the kind of I was going to say the pressure, but I don't mean that in a bad way, but the kind of influence that students are putting on schools, on sort of organizations, on publishers and exam boards and all those kind of people to let us know really kind of vocally and articulately how they want to study a diverse curriculum and how they don't feel that the curriculum that they have in front of them necessarily does that. So yeah,
that's very exciting. I mean, it's a democratic process, isn't it? And that's what we want. But it's also that thing where society has changed, Britain's changed, you know, it's much more mixed. And so we should be telling all these stories and celebrating them all. And I think it makes a huge difference as well when you read something and you recognize yourself, or you recognize that character, even if it's not you particularly, but it's a world that you understand. So yeah. No, brilliant, very exciting. Got lots to choose from there.
Yeah, totally. And actually, when you mentioned adapting Anita and Me,
yes,
it reminded me that this is a bit of an aside, really. Sorry. Yeah. You adapted A Doll's House, didn't you, for the Hammersmith Lyric? Because the English team, we all came out and watched that as a kind of as a sort of team outing. And A Doll's House is obviously one of it's quite a kind of regularly taught A-level text. So there is a real kind of
Yes.
circle of kind of connections kind of being made across the different writers and the different specifications now.
Yes, yes, that's right.
It was
Yeah.
a fantastic adaptation.
Thank you.
We thoroughly enjoyed it. So I was just, when I was sort of introducing you there, I was kind of just giving a few examples of some of your, some of the writing that you've done. What was it about drama writing specifically? Because we talk about, writing for the theatre, writing for radio, writing for TV. What was it about drama writing specifically that kind of attracted you to that genre?
Well, I'm like Halima. My background is Bengali, and my parents were basically arty farties. So my mum was an Indian dancer, and my father was a singer, even though they had day jobs. But that was their passion. Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, who's the Indian national poet, and Bengali. So I grew up watching my parents. They drove me mad because they were very dramatic. But I watched them performing Tagore dance dramas, and so I was brought up. Unlike a lot of my friends at school who were told, you've got to be a doctor, lawyer, an accountant. I was told you have to be a writer. Right. And so it's that thing where, again, it's about what you're encouraged to do, which makes you believe in yourself. And for me, it just was a no-brainer that I was always going to be a writer. I tried to write a novel because I thought if you're going to be a writer, that must mean you write a novel. And it was a really, really bad novel. And somebody read it, a friend of mine, and said, you know what, your dialogue's really good. Have you thought about writing theatre for theatre? I remember thinking, why did I not think of that in the first place? Because that's exactly the background that I come from. So it was a bit like a duck to water. I mean, I always wrote ever since I was a child. I loved stories. So for me, it's a bit like, like an artist who can't stop drawing or painting or doodling. It was basically that's what I was destined to do, although I had to work to make a living for many years.
Right.
So
no, that's I think it's whatever it is that our parents do, that's kind of part of their job, isn't it, to do it kind of flamboyantly in front of us and make us think.
Yes. It can have the opposite effect, of course.
Yes, no, that's true. Good going. I should have mentioned again before we started talking that obviously if any of our delegates this afternoon would like to pop any questions that they would like me to ask you into the Q&A, I should have reminded people to please do feel free to do that. So my colleagues in the background will be keeping an eye and feeding any questions that might come through to me. So I just wanted to remind people to please do that if they would like to. So obviously we've mentioned that the Empress has been added on to the GCSE specification now. And for people who might be a little bit less familiar with it, who might not have seen it or read it yet, would you mind telling us a little bit about the play and maybe some of your inspiration for writing it?
Well, I'll start with the inspiration first, and it basically comes from a school teacher. So there was a school teacher called Rosina Visram, who worked for the Ilia in, I think, the 1970s, 80s, and she wrote a book called Ayahs, Lascars and Princes. And it was basically because when she was teaching history at school, she could not believe that there was no black or Asian history at school. So she was very much wanting to write something herself to redress the balance. And she wrote this fantastic book, which is about the history of South Asians in Britain from something like the 16th century. And in that book, there was and I think I read it when I was about 18. And in that book, there was a picture of a group of Indian ayahs. That's ayahs means nannies, like Mary Poppins, basically, from the 19th century, sitting around a table. And they were all reading the Bible. I think one of them has the Bible upside down. And they're all wearing these incredible nanny's outfits, like these black with the little white cap. And my first reaction when I looked at the photograph was, oh my God, who are they? And it said underneath the Ayah's home, the Indian Ayah's home, 1890 in Hackney. So that was the inspiration. And that's when I thought, I want to write a play about this. And I took it to the RSC, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and said rather cheekily, I want to write a play about British Asians in London in the 19th century. And the artistic director said, go on then. So the Empress is really about the journey of this 16-year-old Aya who turns up in London in 1888, and it follows her right through to the end of Queen Victoria's rule in 1901. And so Rani is the real Empress of the play, but the other Empress is, of course, Queen Victoria. So I tried not to get too obsessed with Queen Victoria, but she had a relationship with an Indian manservant towards the end of her reign called Abdul Karim. So the play follows both these women. One is the Empress of India, who never ever actually went to India, and the other is Rani, who comes over from India, and it's about her life and how she makes her way in London. There are also other characters. I got very interested in the fact there were so many Indian politicians running around London at the time, like Mahatma Gandhi, and then the first first Indian MP for the Liberal Party called Dadabhai Naoroji. And when we talk about diversity, I mean, he was the first Indian who became a British MP in Gladstone's last ministry, but he was Parsi. So he was a Zoroastrian. So there were like Muslims, there were Zoroastrians, there were Hindus, there were Muslims, and they were all in 19th century London. And so that's what my play tries to address, to look at, but as well as Queen Victoria. But so it's a kind of like, just to show, you know, we've been here for a while, and and you know, it's not like we all came over in 1960 or in Windrush. We've been here, part of the community, for a long time.
I think that's really important and really valuable. And I've always got my exam board hat on, which I try and take off because I know it's really boring for everyone. But when you're thinking about, you know, texts which are going to work in the classroom and texts which are going to sort of mesh together with other parts of the curriculum that teachers have to cover, particularly because we all know there's not that much time, you know, to get through the content. Another part of the English literature curriculum is a 19th century text. So you've got your Dickenses and you've got your Austins and your this and your that. And even though students, when they're studying those texts, they don't have to be assessed on the context, almost everyone who teaches those texts likes to situate them in their Victorian context, because otherwise there could be sort of barriers to students engaging with the bigger picture, and there can therefore be a tendency to have quite a narrow interpretation of what Victorian Britain might have been like. So a combination of a text like the Empress, which gives a completely different take on that Victorian period and Queen Victoria herself in that wider context, I think would be a brilliant complement to some of the other work that teachers might already be doing in their 19th century texts. So if anyone was just sort of thinking about that from a planning perspective, I think that could be really great. And obviously for those teachers who might not be aware, context is something that students do have to engage with for their contemporary play or their contemporary novel. So it gives them an opportunity to do that in a really interesting way. So what you mentioned that you kind of started writing and you sort of almost can't stop, you know, like a painter who keeps on painting. Do you have a particular kind of approach or process when you go about starting to write a play? And did they all kind of come out in the same way? How do you go about doing that?
They all come out slightly differently, and I think that I think the word I would describe my process is absolute chaos. Actually, that's two words. But yeah, I think probably I start from, I just love stories. So I'm often found hanging around bus stops listening into people's conversations and, you know, just reading. I mean, actually reading other plays and reading other novels is, you know, that's always been my love. I just, you know, or film or any kind of story. So I think that for me, politics is very important. So I think that being a writer is quite a political thing, in that, you know, we aim to write plays which say something about the world in which we're living. And so quite often, I mean, there's enough politics in the world right now to kind of take inspiration from. And it's often the stories the stories that interest me are often the stories that we don't hear enough of. So so I guess that's where I would say I could take my inspiration from.
And was there something specific about the Empress that you wanted audiences to leave feeling, or kind of, knowing, of taking away with them? Obviously, the majority of our students are going to be engaging with it on the page, and there's something interesting about that, isn't there? Versus engaging with it as a performance. But was there something you particularly?
I think because I wrote it for the Royal Shakespeare Company, I was very aware of Shakespeare hovering in the background. So my nod to him was to, I think that it's kind of a springboard from the play The Tempest, which is that at the beginning of the play, the main protagonists arrive by boat in Tilbury Docks, and at the end of the play, they leave. But the two people that don't leave are Rani, our main character, who is the Ayah, and her husband, and they stay. And for me, the end, I guess for me, the image of that at the end is that these are early immigrants. These could be our parents, and that's them in 1901. So it's again coming back to that idea that, that this is migration that took place over a long period of time, and that actually, these people stayed. They didn't go back because they wanted to make a difference in this country.
Yeah. Carry on talking about this for ages, but I'm aware of time. But just perhaps before we wrap up, just because obviously it's a slightly different context, isn't it? You wrote your play, it was for the Royal Shakespeare Company, it was going to be performed on the stage, and now it's going to be a text that students read and study for their GCSE, and then they go into an exam and they analyze it and they answer questions on it, which I don't know, I kind of feel that might be a slightly strange feeling, for your text to be used in that way. But how did you feel about the idea of it being a GCSE set text when you found out about that?
I was really, obviously really excited and very happy. But apart from anything else, I think there's a lot from the Empress that people can pick up on, because it's quite fun as well.
Yeah,
there are quite. I mean, the relationship between Queen Victoria and her Indian manservant is written in quite a humorous way. So and it's quite sort of risque at times. So it's quite interesting in terms of there's lots and lots of different characters, and I would hope that people would reenact some of the scenes as well, because apart from anything else, it's there to be performed. And actually, sometimes even just reading it out loud is you get more from it than just reading it off the page, because it is a play. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just absolutely, as they say, made up that people are going to be studying it, and yeah, and hopefully they'll get stuff from it that I didn't even realize was in there. So
well, yeah, indeed. That's what I was wondering. I don't know. Yeah. It's always a risk being an author who's contemporary with the students who are studying your text, because they can reach out to you on Twitter. Yes. They can find you and ask you questions. I don't know if any of that has happened yet, but have you come across any sort of interpretations or ideas about the play that you thought, I never even thought of that, but it's an interesting kind of take on it?
Yeah, no, definitely. There have been quite interesting feedback. Some people just absolutely love it, and some people have felt that it's very critical of the empire. And I think, well, yeah, I think that is the idea. It's just like the ridiculous.
Sorry, not sorry.
and have said that. So that's always quite interesting. But actually, what we do is we write to provoke as well, and to provoke a reaction. And if you leave people feeling, moved in some way, then that's a really good thing. And if they've got loads of questions as well, that's very good, because you don't want to just preach to people and just preach to the converted. So yeah, no, it's very exciting. I'm looking forward to reading some essays.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's been absolutely lovely to have you join with us, and to have have a little bit of a conversation with you. We will absolutely send you some examples of some student essays and their interpretations, or if they do any kind of, you know, performances or anything like that. I think it would be that would be fantastic. But I'm just going to say thank you so much, and I'm sure everyone in the audience would, if you could hear them, they would be joining me in thanking you.